Okay, so for our next time slot, we'll be coming to Mexico. We were earlier in South America, and we'll be coming back to Latin America, this time Mexico. And we have a guest who's Aldo Medina. Aldo, I think you're already here. So yeah, so welcome to this 24-hour conversation on the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So Aldo is coming from an organization that is called Ticket for Change. It's a very interesting organization. Aldo will tell us a little bit about it later. Who's trying to accompany and trying to help people who wants to change what they do. For example, people that have been working for capital, like in industries, capital and profit oriented, and they want to do a different thing, environmentally or socially meaningful. So Aldo, thank you very much for being here with us. And maybe we can start this conversation with a short presentation of yourself and what you do in Ticket for Change.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm very pleased and thankful of sharing this time with you, this space. Thank you very much. To get started, maybe putting the frame of what we do in Ticket for Change. As a lot of you are since long time activists or working in this area, I feel like a complete stranger because that wasn't my case. I had like a very random and classic let's say, career in the corporate area until COVID, where I actually started asking me the right questions of saying what I'm doing with my time, what I'm doing with the work I do, more than just giving more money to big corporations. What is my work doing for the best of the world, right? So I think we are a lot of people out there in the world asking these questions. And this is how I found the path of Ticket for Change, which is an organization that try to help people to rediscover their purpose. Because, I think there are not enough activists, there are not enough people changing the world, but we all have the potential of being a change maker. And things that sometimes when you're a teenager, when you have to follow the path, or you have the pressure of the school or your parents, you have to choose, right? Either the social area, either you have a job. And I think that's a problem because we're asked to choose a path. And sometimes we believe it cannot go together. And what we do in Ticket for Change is actually breaking that dilemma, right? Because we do work in a company and you can still be a change maker. And we believe that you can change paths, right? And become an activist at 35 or later. Or that you can actually be an activist, but also have a profit company that creates also social and environmental impact. So the movement started in Paris 9 years ago, and today we're expanding. We started in Mexico. And what we do is we help people to find this path, to say, whatever you want to do, use your talent. We all have skills. And we know that these movements, these organizations that are fighting for human rights, they need helpful people. They need people with talents to go beyond what they can do, right? Sometimes you have the idea, but how to connect with the right persons, how to finance the work you are doing, how you can become more attractive in social media so your voice can be expanded, right? So you need help as an activist or as a movement. And there's a lot of people there that have talent, and they say, okay, maybe I have time. I work 9 to 5, but I can engage myself somehow. So we help people to use their talents to help projects either launch their own social and environmental project or get engaged into these organizations to help other organizations to follow their path. So we try to do that. So we try to activate this talent from people all around the world, because we do believe it's not enough the work we're doing with current activists. They do need help. They do need to go further with their organizations. And we do believe that it's not, the problem is that people is not sensitive, The problem is that it's too far. We don't feel connected, right? We were talking about the Kurdish situation. Maybe first, sometimes we're not aware. This is the first problem. But when we are aware, we can say, I'm not I'm not a policymaker. I'm not working in an NGO. So what can I do? And actually, you can do a lot of stuff. You can help with marketing skills. You can help with finance skills. You can help with whatever you know, because these organizations need support. And this is what we want to do, to get people use their talents to support these projects. So this is like a first like a short resume of what we do in Ticket for Change.
Thank you very much. I mean, it was interesting, like the way in which you were talking about like this kind of conversion, because I think, I mean, it's maybe something very interesting we're facing. I mean, we've been talking about a lot of important topics earlier in our conversation. For example, just transition. We will have also a panel from colleagues from the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation in the COP28 who are discussing very important environmental questions on just transition again. And I think the question of the conversion, it's very important. You were talking a little bit about your own conversion and like the professional reconversion of many people who have been working for capital oriented and profit oriented sectors and companies. And I would like to ask you a little bit more about like this process of conversion, because we've seen it like in many different ways of how like people that have been completely disconnected with social and environmental issues can, like, I don't know how this process works, like for you or for people you accompany when they become aware of the need of a change, not only in their lives, but also like towards, like this kind of problematics in the world.
Yes, of course. Well, first of all, I have to say something. We're not against companies. That's the point, because we will work like most people in the world. They spend at least 8 hours a day working, right? So we do believe actually that we can change the world using your work time. I'm not saying that the capitalist model is the unique model, but is a reality that we spend a third of our lives working at least. So we have to make something with these 1,100 hours that we're gonna use in our lives, more or less, right? So if you could help people to use 8 hours, per day to solve social and environmental problems, the world will be completely different. So what we believe is that people sometimes are scared, sometimes they are confident enough, to get off the system, right? To say, okay, I want to fight against injustice, or I want to become 100% activist. So people need to pay the bills. People need to have some family. So some people cannot just break their life and start again, but they do want to do something. So we're providing alternatives for these people to actually say, okay, first of all, why don't you get to know yourself better, right? Which are your talents? What are you good at? Okay, because a lot of people have confidence. You have a lot of people with a lot of good ideas that could be activists, that could be doing some things, but they don't believe they're credible enough. They don't believe they have the right voice to speak, right? And sometimes we do believe, I have these ideas, but who am I to lead the change? But that's the point. If we still think that only certain people can bring this social change, that's a problem, because there are not enough change makers. So why don't we make everybody a change maker? Because everybody can do it. So don't worry, you don't have to stop your work. You can do change from your work. The only thing is that you have to get to know your talent, and with your talent say, okay, I'm really maybe at creativity, or I'm really good at finance, or I'm really good at whatever you do. And now how can you use this talent that you have to some topics that are the biggest stakes in the world, or in your country, or in your city, okay? And talking about human rights, okay, there are a lot of problems around there, right? We're talking about education, we're talking about gender equality, we're talking about violence, peace. So how can I actually use your work and your time for this project? So we help people to discover these two things, because a lot of people, we realize their lack of confidence to actually become a change maker and help these movements, or this change in their cities, because they lack of confidence. Second, they're missing some skills, right? There are some people that are really good at something, but they cannot do public presentations, or some people, they cannot actually share what they want to do. So we help them to get those skills that are necessary to become a change maker and to take action, right? To create a project, not only in my mind, but okay, how we do these things, something concrete. And third, we connect people, because we know that it's very difficult to create change. We have to create a system change, right? There's systemic problems, so we need to work together to those change. So what we do is we connect people with other networks of change makers, with other people, with other companies, with other associations, because we do believe we cannot imagine the world only working from the activist point of view, right? You have to engage companies, private sector, policymakers, so you can change the system, right? So that's what we do, and this is something has been working for 9 years now, and doesn't mean that the movement is quick, but I think it's super important. Most people believe they can do something, right? Because sometimes this is why a lot of problems still not having a solution, is that we believe that only few people are asked to that mission. We believe that only NGOs are supposed to solve that. We believe that only governments are supposed to do that. And as a random citizen, we don't get action. We don't get engaged because we don't feel that empathy, right? Or we don't believe confident enough to that. So if we change that, imagine the world of having a lot of change makers helping those organizations, helping those initiatives, and actually they can also raise a hand and say, okay, I want to fight for this, right? But this is a different approach, right? This is an approach where we don't exclude companies. We actually say, how can you change the company, how we do business? Actually, we're even talking of a third alternative, is actually having companies with a social mission, right? That at the same time, for each dollar or for each euro or for each peso that you're invoicing, you're also providing something positive to the world. And we do believe that is not bad cops and good cops situation, is that getting everybody together to create a system change. And so far, this is what we have been working on.
Hi, Aldo. Thank you again for joining us. I really appreciate you hopping on the stream. And I just have a question about Ticket for Change. And is there a particular sector or certain position that people sort of approach you with, that they're in currently, that they're sort of just frustrated with and really want to make a change from this position, whether it be like banking, I don't know, insurance, or anything like that?
Your mic is muted.
Sorry, I'm sharing my screen, so we can maybe give you more ideas of what we think. Actually, there's not a sector in particular where I would say people are more sensitive or more conscious. I think what we said is this, right? A lot of people want to do something, but they need confidence. They lack some skills or knowledge, and they miss the networks, right? They're not connected with the right people. So what we want to do, we connect with three different profiles. I want to share the second slide. I'm not sure if I can. Okay, I'll share it again. But the second thing I wanted to share with you is that also we see a difference in age, actually. I think sometimes when the first time you ask yourself these interesting questions is when you have to choose a career, right? Some people that go through a classic path, like having high school, that have actually the privilege, because it's a privilege, right? Is even if it's a right education, we are aware that not everybody has this right of getting to university or to high school. So maybe at this point, some people just get aware of saying, okay, you know what, we should be doing maybe other things more than just getting a diploma or making money, right? So I would say students and people in transition, people that at some point either get laid off, either they cannot get a job. I think this is the point in the life when you ask yourself sometimes these questions, right? What am I doing with life? Should I be doing this in the same path? How can I become a change maker and help these social and environmental problems? So this is some part of the people that come to us. Another is that people that already have this idea of becoming social entrepreneurs. This is what I'm saying. Capital sometimes we believe is the root, and I want to differentiate the system, the capitalistic system, from the idea of being an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur, without thinking of the capitalistic system, is someone that wants to solve something, right? That doesn't have the idea of what would be the output, but what they want to create something, right? So these people create jobs. These people have creativity to say, okay, we have been without water, or we have been without problems in our community. How can we do things different, right? So they bring innovation. So how about helping these people that have these skills of being entrepreneurs, but helping them to create social entrepreneurs, right? To create social venues, social enterprises that actually do have in their mission providing something good to the population, right? Not only using as a colonialist approach the resources of that community, but actually bringing back. Okay, so we help those people. We're not saying you shouldn't be using capitalism as a resource. We say, okay, why don't we switch a little bit the system? So let's be an entrepreneur, but include the social area, right? In your business model, in the way you act, in the way you design your products. We're talking about eco design. We're talking about our circular economy, like some things that are trendy now, and that we need people to be talking about these things and to include them in the way they consume, in the way they interact with the community, right? And the third one is people actually in some companies that get the chance to have positions where they can change things. If you are the manager of the marketing, if you are the manager of sales, if you are the manager of an area where your voice, where the way you think can change the world, maybe you could be changing the way a company has its process, right? We're talking about equality. We're talking about migrants. We're talking about a lot of problems that we have regarding the human rights. But how can you shape the way we actually approach those rights in your company, right? One example is that how can you provide in your company a space for migrants or for people that are traveling, right? Say, okay, you know what? I wanna make people of my company aware that we actually can include these people, that they have skills, that they could help us. So you are becoming an ambassador of human rights in your company, right? You can also address the problem of gender in your company. You can say, okay, you know what? Probably we should be changing some things. So why we only have men in the direction or in the managing positions? And you could actually ask to having a committee. You could actually raise the hand and say, okay, let's make some things. Let's make clear what's the difference of payment between men and women, right? So we need these people in the companies addressing these topics and making a change in the companies. We don't want these people to leave the company and necessarily or mandatory become an activist, because actually their place is in the company, and they could be changing the world and changing the way we work in the companies, changing the way we approach these human rights from the company side. So we do believe these people, if they are there and they are skilled enough and they have the talent, they can change this. They can make this change in the company. So I would say this is how we are approaching the thing, right? Everybody can be a change maker. So use those 8 hours a day to change the world, wherever you are, as a student, as an activist, or as a social entrepreneur, or in your company. Because we do believe it's easier to do it that way instead of asking everybody to become an activist, right? Because it's scary. It's not easy. We know how difficult it is. And in so many countries, the threats we have as an activist, right? People have is you against a system. So it's super, super difficult. So it's scary. So it's not easy to ask someone, live your life, live your family. There are very, very courageous people doing this. And I'm impressed of these people. But you have a bunch of people that could be doing change without asking them to be in this position, but actually using their current position of influence or of skills to change the world, right? So this is a little bit what we do, and a different maybe way of seeing things. But I think there's only one way. If we want to change the things, we have to do it in a systemic way, and I do believe that.
Yeah, it's an awesome explanation. I do think like meeting people where they're at. I think your last point is really important. It's, like not asking people to, quit their job right now and get out in the streets, but what can you do even if you're sitting at your desk for 8 hours a day? How can you use that time to sort of shift your priorities and in your work to actually include some people who otherwise wouldn't be included in that work? And I guess just to follow up on that, are there any like particular skills that you found are really sort of advantageous to making people change makers in their current roles? Like what skills do you see most often that people have that are really easy to use to start sort of changing the world from their positions?
Well, I think first of all, empathy. We have to work a lot of empathy because, as we were saying, we were talking about Kurdish, right? In Mexico, in Latin America, we don't get a lot of curriculum of history around the world, right? So a lot of people, they may know where is Turkey, but they don't know the problems and the different people that live in what today we call Turkey, right? And the thing about nations. I think we have to get people inspired. So first of all, to be a good or to detect potential change makers is curiosity. People that actually are asking themselves, is this the right way? Is this the only way? This what I'm told as a history is the only way, the only narrative we may have. So we need more curious people. So we have to foster curiosity and we have to detect curiosity, right? Because those people asking questions, they are important. They are necessary. They are important, right? Because they're gonna actually challenge the colonial way history has been told, or they're gonna challenge the system way we are told to behave, right? So I would say first of all this curiosity. Second, we need to improve the empathy, right? And empathy is not I have to live the same things you are living. It's understanding that sometimes we have a privilege, and from my privilege, what can I do actually, or how can I actually help someone, right? Or being sensitive to this. Sometimes you have people that are not facing these problems, right? Let's talk about migrants. A lot of people maybe they haven't had the necessity to leave their place, so they don't understand how difficult it is to start again. But if you have been at some point, even just traveling, feeling disappointed because you have this cultural shock, or just feeling not in the right place, you can maybe start understanding what would be the life of someone that sometimes they don't have the opportunity to work, even if they can work, if they have abilities and if they want to, but it's just because the system is not enabling them to do this. So second point, I would say empathy, to understand that there are people struggling there and that you could help them, right? And the third point is to take action. You cannot be a change maker if you do not take action. And you have a bunch of people with very good intentions, people with a good and incredible ideas, but that's it. It's in their head, right? If you don't take people to take action, things are not going to change. We need people with courage enough to say, okay, I'm going to speak up. I'm going to change things, right? And this is where take action is the most difficult part, because a lot of change makers, they want to do something, but they don't know how or they don't know what. So the fourth point I would say after you take action is connect with people. Your voice is stronger when you're not the only one talking, right? If we connect people with other persons, that would be amazing. And this is something important with change makers, right? We have seen that in this ecosystem, people are very collaborative, right? You have a bunch of organizations around the world, like Ashoka, you have Global Shapers, you have a bunch of organizations. And sometimes the problem is that everybody is doing common things on their side without talking. So it's super important for activists actually to get together, to get to know other organizations, other people, get inspired, help, put resources together. This is the way things have to be done, to go faster and to move faster. It's like, for instance, Ticket for Change. I'm not the guy with the idea of creating Ticket for Change, but I got to this organization and say, hey guys, I love what you're doing this. Why don't we do this in Mexico? And replicating an idea, instead of saying, okay, I have to be the one with the biggest or greatest idea, we have to stop this ego. And sometimes in activism, there's ego. too, right? So sometimes, why don't we join a movement that is already there? Why don't we join forces, right? So this is something also very human, that we are raised with this competition approach instead of thinking of a system approach, right? Of solving things. So I would say those four things, right? Curiosity, empathy, taking action, and working in networks. That is the way, so far I have seen, change makers are doing great jobs, and we can move faster in this area.
Thank you. And maybe I would like to ask you also like another question. And it's about, you told me that you were also trying to address, like in the different processes you were carrying on, you were trying to address also like an orientation towards human rights. So I wanted to ask you as well, how is the work you do related to what we're talking about today in these 24 hours, which is human rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights?
Yes, that's something very, very important. I would say, first of all, I think it's very difficult, right? If you talk about human rights, sometimes people say, okay, I know what it is as a concept, but they feel it far, right, from their reality. So what we try to do is to make people understand what are the topics actually you care most, right? Some people will be very sensitive because their own history to liberty, right, or to freedom, or to the fact of saying the gender perspective, or maybe sometimes even if it's not a human right by itself, of living in peace, maybe in an ecosystem without pollution, right? I think sometimes we have to think about, more than understanding like the concept of human rights, is concretely how do I do in my daily basis in my community to actually change things and make things clear, so people can live in peace, so people can live in good conditions, right? It could be education, as we're saying, it could be gender. So we help people understanding these problems, because if I talk to you of something, maybe let's imagine equality or gender, right, or violence. Some people maybe will say, okay, that's important, but I'm more sensitive to some other topics like education, right? Or I'm more sensitive to maybe other topics like animal health or slavery or whatever. So we try to connect people with a problem they are really more empathic to, and when they get to know this problem, we say, okay, what can you do actually for that? What are your skills? And some people say, well, I can do this. I have some free time. Maybe I can volunteer. I'm really good at teaching, or I could help actually someone. I'm really good at writing. Okay, why don't would you use your writing skills to help those people, right? In this topic, in this particular topic. And this is how we have connected people with some specific topics related to human rights, right? Getting to know other people that are working in these topics and saying, okay, how can you help these initiatives? So this is how we have connected people in education programs. This is how we have connected people working on gender, and specific in Mexico with the violence to women. We are one of the most violent countries for women in the world. So we're helping these people, right? And we have got people from law school. We have got people from different places and different areas that are saying, okay, I'm really sensitive to this problem. I want to support these organizations. I want to do something. So they get engaged, they get connected as mentors, as volunteers, or sometimes they launch their own side business. And their side business could be when I say a business, is more an activity, right? Sometimes it's like an NGO saying, okay, I'm sensitive with this topic. Let's get some time and let's help people in this topic. So we try to do it with this approach, more hands-on, let's say. We never talk about, okay, do you know human rights, or what do you know about human rights? So let's talk about human rights. We try to make it more concrete in their daily basis, in whatever they connect most. And once they are in this area, they understand, right, that everything is connected. That once you help people with education, this education will provide peace maybe to this community, and this community will provide maybe this free movement, and you have a lot of things interconnected. So this is the way we approach it so far.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know, Julian, if you have like another question or any other questions or
Yeah, I guess maybe just one more to wrap up for my questions. I think what like motivated you to join the Ticket for Change, and like what were you seeing in your own life that did the sort of organizational message like attract you, or did you kind of just stumble upon it and then figured like, no, this is exactly the organization that I want to be at and where I can make the most change by like basically finding other people who want to make change?
Well, I think to me, what the trigger really was the pandemic. At some point, I said, okay, I have been always sensitive to these topics, but I never I never had this activism side, right? I went to business school and I was working, but I was sensitive to that. But that was the problem. I think I connected really with this idea of understanding everybody can be a change maker. Because before I used to say, okay, that's not for me, right? I would like to help, but I'm not ready to leave whatever I have done. I have some engagements too, so I was not ready to live this life. But at some time, I was feeling that I was missing a good opportunity to do something more, right? So I think this approach of saying you can do change whatever you are, I think that was very powerful. And I said, okay, that's good because that's make it possible, right? And they're not asking me to leave my family and to go to the other side of the world and maybe to be in a war zone because it's horrible and we need people in those places, but we're not all able sometimes to take that engagement, right? So that was very powerful to say you can make change from where you are, right? But take action. I think that was a good idea, and maybe was also the way of understanding that is a movement, right? That today, wherever you are, you can be part of this movement, and that this movement actually is part of other movements of change making. This is what I like too, because what Ticket for Change is doing is only a part of a whole ecosystem of change makers that are doing some things, right, with specific focus. Some of them more into human rights, some of them more into environmental issues, but being connected in a network, I think that's super interesting. So this is what I also like. The way Ticket for Change works and the way we are doing it, this in Mexico, is super collaborative. What I mean by collaborative is that all our programs, we try to connect with other people's. We try not to be competitors. We try to understand the offering and say, how can we bring something to the table, right? Instead of having programs very similar, we say, okay, there's someone working in human rights issues. How can we support them, right? How can we be complementary? So I think that's also a new understanding and a new way of working. And a lot of NGOs miss that, right? Sometimes they fight for the same fundings, or they fight for the same beneficiaries or the same positioning, instead of saying, okay, let's work in a collaborative way. So I think this is also something we have to change from our mind. How can we work together and bring things together? And this is also what I appreciated a lot, because I was coming from a very competitive world, right? In the classic capitalism world, where is everything competition, either you, either me, who's winning. And when you break this, and you say, okay, we're fighting for something, so saying it different ways, let's put everybody the best, and let's see how things work. And this has been very powerful for me.
It's awesome. It's a great answer. And I think I also came from actually a similar like organization. It's actually nonprofit, but it also had competition, and there was like a lot of overlap operating in the same spaces as similar nonprofits. So it was also interesting, the places where there wasn't any like sort of competition, so to speak. Like, yeah, the impact is highest when you can essentially find the areas that aren't covered and try and like help those people out as well. So definitely a fascinating conversation, and a really great organization, Ticket for Change, doing great work down in Mexico and in France as well. So really appreciate you hopping on and joining us for the stream. And yeah, if you want to have the floor for any parting messages.
Well, whoever is listening to this, I mean, take action. That's what we need. We need more change makers. We need more people asking questions, not just accepting the way we're living today, right? Or whatever situation we have in the world, and just to let them know that you can make a change. and start knowing yourself, start knowing what you can do, bring to the table, how can you engage, get to know change makers around you, get to know activists, get to know people that are changing things, and just connect with them. And the more change makers we have in the world, the more people taking action, I think the faster the changes we need, the social changes we need will come, right? This is how it works. We have a tipping point. We need to get to that tipping point the fastest. But when we get to that tipping point, we have seen this change in the world, right? We have seen it in the US, we have seen it in South Africa, South Africa. We have seen it in a lot of places. We need to get to that tipping point. But to get to that tipping point, we need to move things, engage people, get them aware, and taking them to take action. So join a movement, do something, get engaged as you wish, but get engaged and go further. Thank you very much, everybody.
Great answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I guess we're about 25-ish minutes from our next panel, our last panel actually, on the rights of labor. So different labor movements, both within the US, New York City, but also around the globe. So I'm gonna try and share my screen correctly this time, and we can resume the documentary on the songs of slavery and emancipation, and be back in about 20 minutes, 5 minutes before that next panel starts. Introduce the topic again for the viewers, and hopefully get ready for a great conversation. We'll have 3 speakers for the final panel on labor. So let me try and share my screen here.
That's great. Otherwise, if you want, I could share it as well. Well, if you manage to.
Yeah, let me try it first.
Okay. Yeah.
I think I got share sound. Share.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
It's very easy to go to a Black studies section or an African American studies section. It's very easy to go to Netflix and choose your algorithm. I want to see a Black movie that's a documentary and things like that. But it's hard for us to imagine that there was a time when that was not available, right? That a lot of the history that we're talking about today came from insurgent sources. They came from people doing research and deep into archives, going deeper into archives and then representing that work as a category of Black history. Part of the reason that that's the case was the fact of the matter is that at the end of the Civil War, there was a concentrated effort, right, amongst the ruling elites in this country to bury the radical history of the Civil War.
We want no cowards in our band that from their colors fly. We call for valiant-hearted men that are not afraid to die. Children, we all shall be free. Children, we all shall be free. Children, we all shall be free when the Lord shall be. We see the pilgrim as he lies with glory in his soul. To heaven he lifts his longing eyes and bids this world adieu. Children, we all shall be free.
I was impressed with the fact that there were abolitionist songs in this collection of songs. The whole abolitionist movement is not understood. You know, it's marginal in the telling of the story.
For a long time, revisionist historians of the Civil War had portrayed it as a needless conflict, and one that was brought about by fanatics north and south. And abolitionists were seen as these extremists, these religious fanatics who had no idea what they were doing, and that they sort of created a problem for the country by raising the issue of slavery in a very strident way. And of course, that view of abolition had been challenged, by African American historians. And during the Civil Rights Movement, you had sort of an alternative picture of abolitionists as radical activists, particularly because civil rights activists wanted to sort of look back at history and look at predecessors. And they saw abolitionists as as fighting for similar things that they were fighting for, racial equality, black citizenship.
People who were the generation after the revolutionaries see that the promise of freedom for all that was part of the revolution is not being fulfilled. And they engage themselves in the process of fulfilling that promise. And of course, the big issue at the time, two of them really, but the largest one was in the early part of the 1830s was abolition. And out of that was spawned the women's rights movement. And it happened that in central New York, there were a few people who had the means of doing something about that. Gerrit Smith, of course, was one of them.
His influence on abolition at the time was huge. Frederick Douglass, who came to Rochester and wanted to produce the Liberty newspaper, didn't have the finances to do it. He came to Peterborough to get money from Gerrit Smith. John Brown, this radical zealot who wants to bring about an armed reaction to the slavery situation and ends up attacking Harper Ferry, comes to Peterborough and knocks on the door seeking financial and moral support, which, shockingly enough, Gerrit gave him.
You know, going back to the history of abolition, Germany played a tremendous key role in that. Many of the folks who immigrated to the United States in the 19th century were 1848ers. They landed in New York or other places and started socialist newspapers. But the core of what they were thinking about and writing about was abolition of slavery.
Following the defeat of the revolutions of 1848, many revolutionaries, especially Germans, emigrated to the United States. Known as the 48ers, they were very active in the abolitionist movement. Eventually, 200,000 German-born soldiers would serve in the Union Army.
The other interpretation that was very influential and continues to be to a certain extent was this notion that abolitionists just focused on slavery and they were blind to other wrongs in their society, and that in an indirect way they sort of justified or legitimized the rise of wage labor and of capitalism. And when I started looking at abolitionist papers, particularly the Garrisonians, who were the sort of more radical wing of the movement, I found that they were actually fairly perceptive and fairly critical of many other wrongs in their society. That caricature of the abolitionist as an armchair philosopher was simply not correct.
Awake from stupidity's grave, come join in your country's salvation and free the American slave, and free the American slave, and free the American slave. Come join in your country's salvation and free the American slave.
I was first contacted with the possibility that I might be able to contribute some banjo or fiddle music that would be appropriate to the time period and relate to the abolition movement. But as it turned out, my dissertation deals with a tradition to the topics at hand. Shape note singing as a contemporary practice with these roots that go back to the 18th century and beyond, if you want to get into it. That is something that groups of us as friends, as community members, get together to do, largely from The Sacred Harp, a book first published in 1844. There are other books as well. That's one thing. Second thing is old folks concerts, which were a practice singing many of the same songs starting in the mid-19th century in New England. That it was a tradition, it was a fad that became a tradition. And the third thing is abolitionist singing, which employed old folks concerts that included some of these songs, as well as some of those same tunes, but with new texts that specifically addressed the issues of the day. Having done all this research about the connections between this shape note music that we sang as a community of friends and the abolition movement, I became really excited about getting the word out that this was kind of a part of the unknown soundtrack, the silent soundtrack of the abolition movement, and the reasons why it made sense, the reasons why people used it were as interesting as the music itself. They wanted to reach people where they were, and using popular song was a really good way to do that. Henry Wright, this anarchist abolitionist who was involved in leading one of these old folks concerts up the river a bit, he was the first one to really recognize that potential, because he saw the whole community coming out and how, he saw the tears in people's eyes, and he saw that this was music that really reached them and reminded them of the hearth, reminded them of home. And he wrote in a letter to William Lloyd Garrison, he said, imagine getting those people to that place where they're just full of nostalgia and feeling of their youth and family and home, and then introduce this topic, well, what if you were enslaved? What if your child was enslaved? What does home mean to you? What would that bring to mind? So he saw it as really an effective tool of getting right into their souls.
Come join the abolitionists, you young men bold and strong, and with a warm and cheerful zeal, come help the cause along. Come join the abolitionists, ye men of riper years, and save your wives and children dear from grief and bitter tears, from grief and bitter tears, from grief and bitter tears, and save your wives and children dear from grief and bitter tears. Oh, that will be joyful, joyful, joyful. Oh, that will be joyful when slavery is no more, when slavery is
My job also was envisioning how we would want to arrange the music, wanting to put as much of the authenticity as I felt like I could share with it, while at the same time wanting to remain true to what we had. So it's always a bit of a challenge, because you need to know, well, who was the transcriber when they wrote the music? Did they write down the pitches as they thought they should be, or as they actually heard them? And if it's in the Black singing style, we don't even have all of the correct nomenclature to get all of the side twists and all of that stuff in it. So there was an understanding in the performance practice that we wanted to add some of that. The fact that John G. Fee, the founder of this college, was being inducted into the Abolitionist Hall of Fame was the connection that helped make us a part of this project. The choir, the Black Music Ensemble, the choir that I was directing, went to Peterborough, New York for the ceremony. During that induction process, the director of that museum got to know about Berea even more and about our really special history. And so when the producer was looking for a group to sing this kind of music, Berea came up. We have a history of being a place full of abolitionists, trailblazers, folk making a difference. We stand on the shoulders of those who did that in Berea College.
my father, how long? My father, how long? My father, how long? Till we done suffering here. My mother, how long? Oh, my mother.
I was led to the Library of Congress and into the archives that have been collecting since the Civil War. And I looked through literally dozens, if not hundreds, of books, pamphlets, broadsides. These were little one-sheet things that were sold on the street in the United States with songs on them and so on. And I kept coming across what I would consider to be kind of a pattern, which was that the song collectors themselves, some of them in the early 20th century, some in the late 19th century, all came at it with a certain attitude about slaves, slavery, black people and their music, and so on, and apparently either did not hear any songs like this or didn't want to hear any songs like this. This is, of course, a matter of speculation. But I did uncover two things that led me to the conclusion that there were, in fact, more songs than had been collected by, let's say, traditional song collectors. The first was a piece of sheet music that was published in 1820, and it was called the Recognition March for the Independence of Haiti. And it was an instrumental piece, but just the title alone told me that there was something really important here. And the composer of this piece was Francis Johnson, and I found out later that he was a free man of color and was a accomplished composer and Kent bugle player. And it so happens that he was among the most popular band leaders of his era. In fact, he was hired to compose a march and lead a band for the triumphant return of the Marquis de Lafayette to Washington, D.C. So this man was obviously of some standing as a musician. And then I found another song, and this in this case was actually a recorded piece of music. And it was a 93-year-old man named Elijah Cox singing a song called Agonizing, Cruel Slavery Days. Those two songs told me that there is more here than had been put into these collections, which the collections themselves stand as the canon of Negro folk music or slave music in the United States.
On one side of slavery, you have that awful oppression, but on the other side, you also have enslaved people resisting their enslavement, and they could do it by rebellions, by running away, but many of them also wrote about their oppression. The poems of Phyllis Wheatley, who was a genius by any standard. She is one of the first American women to be ever published, not just one of the first Black women to be ever published. And I found that it was really important to look at these early Black writings and see them as part of the abolition movement, which is a way that they had never been looked at. A lot of literary scholars had looked at early writings, essays written in protest, poetry, etc. But historians did not think of that as abolitionist material. But it is important to recover their voices and to hear what they have to say in terms of fighting against slavery, fighting for their rights, and fighting for freedom.
It's worth noting that many of the songs in this collection were not recorded by song collectors, ballad hunters, folklorists, or whatever, but in fact were preserved by people who were directly engaged in the struggle against slavery for the emancipation of the slaves. And for example, Samuel Chapman Armstrong, who was the leader of the 9th Regiment U.S. Colored Troops, and he recorded this song, which in a book is called The Enlisted Soldiers, but he gave it a different name. His notation about this song is the following. While recruiting and drilling the 9th Regiment U.S. Colored Troops at Benedict, Maryland in the winter of 1863-64, The men gathered around the campfire would sing by the hour the melodies of the plantation slave life that they had just left, not always very melodious. But late one evening, I was startled by a magnificent chorus from nearly 1,000 black soldiers that called me from my tent to listen to its most inspiring strains, and I caught the following words, which I called the Negro Battle Hymn.
They look like men, they look like men of old, all armed and dressed in uniform. They look like men of war. It sets my heart quite in a flame, a soldier just to be. I will enlist, gird on my arms, and fight for liberty.
What I liked about the songs, which I think is part of the reason why some of them disappeared in some respects, because they speak to a certain level, to me, of revolutionary clarity. You know, some of it's coded, but if you know the code, it's very clear about, fighting back and keeping the quest going, until we kind of reach the land of the North Star. That was very clear, from the songs. And I think, much like we use a lot of the work of Sweet Honey in the Rock in particular, in some of our kind of anthem songs and get out and move songs and things to inspire us. And when I was sharing it with some of our staff, just even earlier today, some of the music, that was the thing that immediately popped into people's minds. And it's interesting because I made a comment that, it's like, oh, I hear Sweet Honey in the Rock. And I was like, actually, it's the reverse. You hear them building on this legacy. This is just Sweet Honey in the Rock is just more the version that you are familiar with, since it's a little bit more contemporary. But what it speaks to is the foundation of that tradition, and these styles go back 200, 300 years at this point, if we could even dig further, and I think find some material. So it's very relevant in the here and now.
Bernice Reagan once said, she's the great song archivist, singer, from her voice is iconic in terms of Eyes on the Prize, those early films about the civil rights movement. Bernice Reagan said, we will never be free until we learn these songs. And she was talking specifically about spirituals, but in very broad terms, we will never be free. We talked earlier about how oftentimes spirituals use coded language. I'm going to Canaan's land. I'm going, to see Jesus, when really you mean heaven, and all of those things. But in these songs that you brought to us, that you researched, the language was raw. The language said, I'm going to Canada. I had never seen a spiritual that out and out said, I'm going to Canada. I'm going to do this, singing Nat Turner's praise, all of those things.
Nat Turner was the leader of perhaps the most famous slave revolt in the United States. Launched on August 23, 1831 in Southampton, Virginia, Nat Turner's rebellion shattered the image of the docile, contented slave.
The one that sticks out in my mind the most about the misconceptions that are out there is that Nat Turner, the Nat Turner rebellion was not viewed as a major source of inspiration, and that his form of resistance was not praised, celebrated, and thought about and contemplated, and I'm sure tried many, many times over in many places, in stories that were often buried or untold. And it just counters this narrative that somehow, black people, my ancestors, that we just kind of accepted our fate, didn't resist, when in fact the resistance was constant, multifaceted, very nuanced, and very complex. And that it also, I think, really shaped the reality. It doesn't mean that slavery ended, but it changed the terms and conditions of slavery, and I think that was very clear from these songs, and it speaks to what Du Bois called the Great Strike. Like once the Civil War started, how the word spread like wildfire, and how people just immediately stole themselves and got into motion and got into action.
The argument that
It's so hard to stop the video there, but we have another panel coming up here on discussion on the rights of labor. So I'll just give everybody a